Amanda Christovich, Front Office Sports. Boy, there's so many great guests that we have on this show, and she is right at the very top. Try to help straighten things out, or also just admit, like we do, that there's just mass chaos in college athletics. Amanda, thank you so much for being a part of the show yet again with us. So yesterday was fun, huh?
Well, thank you for having me. Yeah, it was quite a day. I woke up thinking I understood how the NIL Clearinghouse process was going to work, and I went to sleep with a lot more questions than answers. Let's put it that way.
What was the most surprising part? That everyone kind of thought there were some sort of guidelines, but that maybe those guidelines were different than what everyone thought? Kind of help us out here.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that my understanding of what was going to be allowed in the world of NIL, or NIL Collectives specifically, was that as long as you had some sort of NIL activity attached to what you were going to pay a player, and that money was like relatively commensurate with the activity that you wanted the player to do, the deals were going to be approved through this new clearinghouse. So like, I'll give you an example, like an autograph signing that a collective signs an athlete up for, or a collective has created content that, you know, an athlete is promoting, or a collective has created merchandise for an athlete to sell, like all of those things, right? What we found out yesterday was apparently that's not allowed. Apparently you need a third party, a non-collective or non-booster company that has to be benefiting from the NIL activity. That is information that was frankly new to me. It was new to a lot of the collective operators that I spoke with and who, you know, spoke publicly yesterday, especially, you know, making statements on social media. Like, we were all under the impression that collectives were going to be able to operate relatively smoothly so long as they didn't just pay a player, you know, for no reason other than the fact that they were on the team, right? If you came up with enough business purposes, that would be okay. It appears that that's not the case. And as a result, I'm not really sure what the purpose of a collective is going to be going forward, outside a couple of, you know, specific, you know, other ways that they could operate. But I mean, really, like, that was not what anyone's understanding was. It wasn't what my understanding was. And it caused a lot of chaos, to say the least.
So, Amanda, it would seem to me that, I know this might be a more complex answer to a simple question, but if they would just define what fair market value is in the simplest of terms that they can for everybody, because that, I mean, we don't really know what is fair. Like, can they give us a price range, a cost sheet, something like that says this is what is fair and this is what this is reflective in the market based on pro athletes with endorsements or things like that? That doesn't seem like they've done that.
Well, not only does it not have they not done that, but they've sort of thrown a curveball and brought an entirely different definition into play as something that is now a problem. Because now valid business purpose is the definition that nobody, you know, really understands. And I can drill down on that a little bit. So according to the College Sports Commission, a valid business purpose has to mean that the NIL activity is benefiting a brand or a company or an entity that has some other purpose that is not an NIL collective or booster. It has to be an outside brand. And so if you're not that, then fair market value, like you don't even get to that question of what fair market value is. And what it seems to me is that the commission is trying to say, like, even if a collective, like we were all worried about collective paying athletes fair market value. Well, it appears that collectives aren't even legitimate, valid business purpose, whatever you want to call them, entities at all, to begin with. So we don't even get to the question of fair market value because apparently a collective can't offer a player money in exchange for goods and services unless the collective is facilitating that for some other brand.
There's Dalton Forsythe. He's a former Utah State athlete, but he's also one that I think either runs or is a major part of Utah State and their collective. He says, from a legal perspective, collectives are valid businesses formed under state law, registered with the IRS, compliant with nonprofit or profit regulations. And what he is saying is that when the whoever it is, the CSC never really said they would disqualify collectives. They look at it with maybe a closer eye or lens. But did they get fooled? Did the collectives all get fooled, or did they, or is this on the Clearinghouse? NIL Go.
I mean, it feels to me like we've all been bamboozled a little bit, and I will say, like, I'll acknowledge there are folks, other folks in the media who, I was kind of exchanging messages with, or I think I even saw a couple athletic directors literally yesterday saying, this was what it meant all along, that, if you're not, it's not a valid business purpose. If you're trying to pay a player as a collective, like, this is what this meant all along. This wasn't a surprise. Well, the fact of the matter is that this was a surprise. I do think that in the last few weeks, this definition has come out. I believe, if I remember correctly, the first time I saw this definition was on June 13th. But think about the timeline there. The NIL Go, you had to start sending deals to NIL Go starting on June 7th, right? Mm-hmm. So if you've been putting deals together for the past several months that you are expecting to be accepted through NIL Go, you're trying to follow the rules, you're looking at this definition, this nebulous definition of fair market value, trying to make sure you hit it, trying to make sure you're compliant, and then all of a sudden, several days after the clearinghouse itself opens, you find out, and again, this is all theoretical because the actual examples of scenarios wasn't given to anybody until yesterday. Like, the definition of valid business purpose, I guess, has been around for a few weeks, but no one has put that into practice in an actual real life scenario until yesterday. So I just don't think it makes any sense. We didn't know what the rules were until yesterday, but the clearinghouse opened on June 7th.
Yeah. Paul, you and Amanda will answer this because this is above my pay grade. Can you have antitrust issues if you don't have athletes as employees? Does that even make sense? What I'm asking?
Yeah, 100%. And that's really what's been happening already. I think it's been proven that the answer to that question is yes. Because even if the athletes aren't employees, there's still a market. There's still a competition market. It might be recruiting. It might be these third-party endorsements. What I want to know from an antitrust perspective, which lawyers will be able to answer for us, I'm sure, when the first lawsuit comes out, is why isn't an NIL collective a valid business? And it's this. I have the same question as the Utah State Collective. Like, what makes a collective that files taxes, that is fulfilling a need in a marketplace? How is that not a valid business? What does that even mean? And is it legal to try to mark a collective as not a valid business, even in a market that's private, that is through a membership organization? that's what the courts are probably going to have to weigh in on if and when a lawsuit over this gets filed.
Yeah, I think it's probably more when than if.
100%.
Yeah, unless they change their guidance to avoid that, which they're so good at doing over the years, Amanda. So this kind of brings us into, and even though I don't want to get too deep in the weeds on any kind of bill, but the SCORE Act, which was introduced yesterday, has a lot of these things codified in it, including given the antitrust exemption that they want, but also has a lot of things that roll back some of the court victories that they have had. One, I wouldn't think that they'll get 7 Democrats from the Senate to vote for this like they would need to anyway. But is this just another attempt by the NCAA to roll back the clock?
100%. This is the SCORE Act is the product of, let's see, 7 years of the NCAA's lobbying efforts. Lobbying efforts that the power conferences have joined in on in Congress, in the Senate, in the House, spending millions of dollars on the top lobbying firms in the entire country to try to convince lawmakers to give the NCAA protections so that its rules cannot be challenged in court. So basically what they're saying is we acknowledge that there's a potential that our business model is not legal. So we would like you to write us a new law. That's literally what they've been trying to do. And the SCORE Act is one of those laws. As you said, it codifies a lot of the terms of the settlement that are going to be challenged in court, most likely, right? And the reason they're trying to do that is to keep that from happening. The reason they want an antitrust exemption to keep that from happening. The reason they want a law stating that athletes can't be employees is because they're being attacked in court on that very question. This is exactly what they've been working towards. I do not think, as you said, I don't think they're going to get 7 Democrats in the Senate. I'm not even sure they're going to get all the Republicans because, there are some Republicans who are extremely anti-NCAA just on principle. So I'm not even sure they're going to get all the Republicans in the Senate. And sure, you could pass the House, and I saw folks saying, this bill is going to get further than any other bill. Well, that's because no other bill has gotten literally anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yep.
So you could pass the House, but that doesn't really mean anything because the House is Republican controlled. And so the issue is always the Senate for any legislation on any topic currently in the United States, right? So I don't really know what that means. I think to me that's just folks listening to the pro NCAA side and trying to give them good press. I just don't think that means anything, frankly.
Is it true that there are some NIL, agreements that athletes either signed or however that is, that they were going to get paid for, but because of the backlog or how slow this is, that those events they were supposed to be a part of have come and gone, and now they may not get paid?
100%. 100%.
What the hell?
I mean, I heard, I talked about in the story I published yesterday, I heard about one athlete specifically who did a deal through a collective, and the athlete submitted the deal, they said 5 business days in advance at least, because the Clearinghouse said, we'll get you an answer in 1 to 3 days. And the collective operator told the athlete, well, that could mean up to 5 business days, right? We're dealing with the business world here. So make sure you get it in several days in advance, which the athlete did. The days came and went. There was no response. This was not a huge deal. I was told it was like a 5-figure deal with several deliverables, like sort of normal requests for activities or content. I'm not exactly sure. I didn't get a specific, if it was social media or whatever. But yeah, this specific athlete ended up losing that opportunity because the deadline for when they had to do the deal passed, and they hadn't even heard from NIL Go, and I'm not sure they ever did. And other stories are sort of coming out, and it's been brought to my attention that in and of itself could be a lawsuit or grounds for a lawsuit. Damages, loss of earnings. So even in the most rudimentary sense, just from a basic procedural practicality standpoint, NIL Go is not working.
So I think that we need to work better, Amanda, all of us in the media, and you're in the media, or anyone who covered the House settlement should get what the attorneys are getting for being a part of the $2.8 billion settlement, and yet they're going to get about a third of that. Is that correct? The legal fees?
They're going to get about $500 million. So is that a third? I'm really not good at math.
I saw a story.
They're going to get $500 million.
I thought it went up to like $750 million now. Is one of the stories that I read. And again, give or take, my God, it's just give or take $250 million. But yeah, and
when you're already getting 500, does another 250 really matter that much?
But that comes out of what the players get, right? That comes out just like if you go to, I guess, court or you're sued or you're a part of a lawsuit, you got to pay your attorney, and that comes out of whatever you might have earned in the settlement or in the verdict.
Yes, that's my rudimentary understanding. Although I will say in that case, like, that's just kind of how these settlements work.
Sure.
It's not really, any sort of major settlement that attorney's fees are going to be a portion of the damages, unless I guess you would strike some other agreement where, like, the defendants are paying the fees, but usually that happens if you lose at trial. So yeah, I mean, look, it's a multi-billion-dollar settlement, and the two law firms that spearheaded for the plaintiffs, they're going to have a nice pot of gold at the end of this rainbow.
Xavier Wolf wraps it up for us, Amanda, in our chat room. Worst off season of all time. We need college football. We need games. People demand it.
Games? What are those?
Yeah. Those are
I forgot about those.
Yeah, those are things that are played later, some other time, down the road, right? And we appreciate you always, Amanda, with your insight and expertise and all your legal information. We appreciate you very much. Have a great weekend, okay?
Anytime. Thanks for having me. Talk to you soon.
Very much. Amanda Christovich, Front Office Sports, with us on 365 Sports.